Okay, all right, so if everyone who should be here is here, I shall call the meeting to order. And I'll read the electronic. Are you gonna post it too?
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, all righty, here we go. So to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, this Library Board of Trustees needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. First, because each member of this Library Board of Trustees is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each Library Board member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I will now conduct the roll call. Brian. So answer.
Yes, Brian Engler, Braddock District Trustee. I'm at home in Burke, Virginia.
Okay, thank you. Miriam Smolin.
Hi, good evening. Miriam Smolin, home in Fairfax.
Thank you. Jane Miscavige.
Hi, Jane Miscavige here at home in Vienna.
Thank you. Suzanne Levy.
Hi, Suzanne Levy, here at home in the city of Fairfax.
Sujatha Hampton.
Hi, it's Sujatha Hampton. I am here in Great Falls, Virginia.
Okay. Sheila Janiga.
Sheila Janiga at home in Reston, Virginia.
All right. Keith Fox.
Hi, good evening, everyone. At home in Springfield, Virginia.
Okay, thank you. Gary Russell.
You're muted, Gary.
Gary.
I'm sorry, Gary Russell, representing Mount Vernon from home.
Thank you. Priscilla Dando.
Good evening, Priscilla Dando at home in Woodbridge.
Thank you. Liz Walker.
Hi, Liz Walker at home in Centerville.
Thank you. And Phil Rosenthal is going to be a little bit late, so he's not here yet. Okay. Let's see. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the vice chair so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. So Jane, you now have the gavel. And I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this Library Board of Trustees. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to the meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this board to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this board and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this board may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated Zoom meeting, and that the public may access this meeting by the following address and password. So that was a move, and I need a second. That was, I moved, so I need a second. Thank you.
I'll second.
And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It is so moved. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And now our meeting can begin.
Here's your gavel.
Thanks for giving me that back. I can't go on without it. It's my crab claw gavel. Okay. Next on the agenda, or the first thing, welcome. We did that public comment, so let me read that statement. The board wishes to provide an opportunity for the public to comment on library-related issues. It is our policy to hear a maximum of 5 speakers at each regularly scheduled board meeting. Speakers are limited to 1 public comment during a 6-month period. Each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes for their comments. A 30-second warning will be given before each speaker's time is up, and the speaker will be expected to end promptly when time is called. Speakers are requested to pre-register with the library director. However, if there are available public comment slots open at the time of a board meeting, the remaining slots may be filled by individuals registering at the meeting. Board members will not question or respond to speakers. Today, there are no registered speakers as of the time I received the board packet. Is that still correct? I think so, yes. And if anyone wishes to speak at a future meeting, please call the director's assistant at 703-324-8324. Okay. Right. Next on the is the presentation. Okay, so right now it is my, you know what, I need to have something changed here. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight, Carla Bruce, who's the Chief Equity Officer for Fairfax County. After championing the adoption of the One Fairfax Racial and Social Equity Resolution and Policy, she now provides management of the One Fairfax Strategic Framework through advising and supporting the Board of Supervisors, the executive leadership, and the entire workforce as they shape and direct policy and practice to foster equitable opportunities for all county residents. She brings over 25 years of local government management experience in bridging the efforts of local government with the collective actions of residents and partners to address community issues. Carla, the Library Board of Trustees welcomes you, and we will have questions afterward, and I remind members of the public that only the board members may question the speaker. So Carla, you have the floor.
And Carla, we've got you set up as a co-host, so you are welcome to share your screen and run through your slide.
Okay. You trust me to do that? Okay.
Always.
Always. Okay, let me do that. 1 second. Well, thank you all very much for inviting me tonight. And while I pull up my presentation. So can you let me know if you were able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and as introduced, I serve as the county's Chief Equity Officer, and I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about One Fairfax, which is the county's racial and social equity policy. It is something that I will be doing with all the county boards, authorities, and commissions over the next several months. But very happy to be here tonight to share with the library board of trustees. The library staff have been great to work with on this journey to become One Fairfax, and we're very early adopters, and am just really thankful for the work that they have been doing in support of this strategic direction of the county. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Christine and Jessica and their whole team for all the work that they've been doing in support of the application of this policy. So thank you very much. So before we start to talk specifically about the policy, I just wanted to provide a bit of context, sort of what led the Board of Supervisors and the school board down the path of adopting a racial and social equity policy. What was going on in Fairfax County, which really drew attention to the fact that there were inequities. And So, what we know about Fairfax County is that Fairfax County is a great place to live, learn, work, and play. But what we also know is that there are distinct disparities in outcomes, life outcomes across all major indicators of life success, and that those outcomes are really predictable. They're predictable by race and they're predictable by place. So what this slide depicts is captured as a map of the county captured in a report that was developed by the Northern Virginia Health Foundation a few years ago. And what you'll see here is that there are areas of the county, specifically census tracts in the county here highlighted yellow. And it's in these areas that there are higher numbers of people of color, but also higher numbers of people who are experiencing vulnerability or who are facing barriers to opportunity. And I'll talk a bit more about that concept of what do we mean by opportunity. But the report highlighted is that, or what it did is it coined a phrase, islands of disadvantage. So what it said is that in the midst of the prosperity of Fairfax County, there are places and populations who aren't faring as well. And those folks tend to live in these areas of the county, and that those areas of the county characteristically have lower levels of opportunity or barriers to opportunity that are faced by the people that live there. And that in these areas, we see higher concentrations of low-income people and higher concentrations of people of color. And when I use that terminology, people of color, broadly, I think it's really important to point out that in this case, it's African Americans and Latinos living in these neighborhoods, in these areas of the county, that are really facing significant barriers or gaps in opportunity, which are contributing to lower outcomes in these indicators of life success. This is not the only report that exists that makes this point. There have been other studies done by Urban Institute and an organization based in California, Policy Link, which also illustrate this sort of distinct difference in access to opportunity across the county. But what these reports also help us to understand is the structural nature of that, right? That this is not just about the people, it's that people living in these areas are through the near situations and conditions in which they live are really constrained from opportunity. So it's not about just deficiency in a population. What it's about is about how that community itself is structured in ways that limit opportunity and limit the ability for people to really to participate in the success, the prosperity of Fairfax County. And that was really sort of the foundation that led our Board of Supervisors and school board to adopt the One Fairfax policy resolutions. The resolution was adopted in July of 2016, and it was an acknowledgement by our board and school board that inequities exist in Fairfax County, excuse me, and that government, local government, plays a role in both creating and perpetuating that inequity, and therefore should play a role in addressing that inequity. And that we would do that working in partnership with the schools, but also working in partnership with other stakeholders in the community.
Excuse me, Carla?
Yes.
Back in the previous chart, what did you mean by spatial, I think it was inequities?
Just that they're geographically different, geographic differences. So it's not based on the people, it's spatially, it's really in the geography of the county.
Okay, right.
And so the policy was then adopted in November of 2017. We're right now nearing the anniversary, the 3-year anniversary of the adoption of the policy. What the policy did was direct that the county government and school system would consider equity in all of our planning and decision making. Now, this policy, when it was adopted, is very broad because it applies to all functions of government and the entire, all the functions of the school system. But it did direct that this consideration of equity would ensure that we worked with the community, that we had meaningful community and stakeholder engagement, that we recognized that there was a capacity to be built within our organizations through training and other sort of structural changes to build up our competency and capacity to consider equity in our planning and decision making, that we would be more effective in our use of data to inform the work that we do. So both listening to the voices of community, but also grounding our decision making in data. But that really importantly, we would work together so that we recognize that while there are significant roles for government to play in advancing equity, that it's something that the government can't do alone, and we would work together with other sectors, including the school system, nonprofits, business and faith communities, amongst others, to do this work. You know, one of the things about this work of advancing equity is it's not short-term work, right? There are individual, there's actions that we can take, but it's really committing to doing the long-term work to see change in the conditions in the communities and in the sort of life trajectory of the population. So we need to set goals around that, and that's this notion of shared accountability, that we will work with partners to name the goals that we want to see for the population and then work earnestly toward achieving those goals. Making progress, but also being, looking at our progress and realizing that we may need to course correct on some of the actions that we take, but that we would be very open about the inequities we see, making that information public, and also being willing to change to see the changes and differences moving in the direction we would like to see. And fundamentally, it's really about asking ourselves a couple of questions. It's understanding through the actions that we take in government, who is benefited and who is burdened. And to the degree benefit is created, we want to share benefits more broadly, right? We don't want benefit to be isolated to just one segment of the population. We want to seek opportunities where the benefits of the actions of the county really can be shared across a broader segment of the population. But also where burden is created through the actions, both at the actions today, but also the actions of the past, because one of the things that's important to recognize is that the inequity that we see in the community is a result perhaps of existing current action, but it's also reflective of our history, a long history. And so without taking into consideration that history, we may not end up at the correct solutions. So with that taken into consideration, we want to seek to mitigate the burden that's created by the actions of government. So we base this work on the recognition that racial inequity, patterns of racial inequity exist in the United States and exist in Fairfax County. And it exists across really, as I said, most major indicators of life success and really across all the major functions of government. So you see here listed housing and education and criminal justice and arts and culture and equitable development, and dare I say libraries. Across every function of government, there is some level of inequity ingrained. And so what we're encouraging people to do, both our staff and our board of supervisors, our staff, our executive leadership, and our board of supervisors as well, excuse me. And I'm in a room where the lights go off if I don't move. So if you see me moving around, it's to make sure that that I activate the lights. So sorry about that. But what we're really helping, wanting people to do is to introduce this racial equity analysis, this racial equity frame, to understand what it looks like in your work, right? So you all carry an expertise about the work of the library system. The transportation department and its related boards, authorities, and commissions carry an expertise about that business area. Public Works carries an expertise about that business area. So what we want to introduce is evidence that inequity exists in our community, and a frame to consider that inequity in your work so that we can be really working to share benefits and mitigate burdens. In the history of government and race is a long history. It's a history that dates back to the inception of our country, in fact. We can name certain periods in our country's history where there were explicit actions by the government that were that really produced inequities based on race. We know the action of enslaving Africans for the purpose of forced unpaid labor was supported by government as a mechanism to build the US economy. That's a fact. And so we acknowledge that that's the history of our country. We know that during the period of World War II, that Japanese Americans were forced into, okay, I'm blocked. Internment camps, yes. That was action by our government. So we know that our government at the national level, as well as at the local level, has taken action that was very explicit in terms of maintaining inequity. We also know that that shifted over time, and in sort of things that were at one point very intentional and explicit became more implicit. Discrimination became illegal, segregation became illegal, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't some level of inequity that continued to be perpetuated through government policies and practices that were deemed to be race neutral. So we see that in our criminal justice system. We see that in education. So we know that even policies that are considered to be race neutral, they can produce racially inequitable outcomes. So we find ourselves in a period today where we acknowledge our history, but aspire to be a government that is proactive in our recognition that we want all people in our community, regardless of race, to be able to thrive and live to their fullest potential. And in order to do that, we have to look at policy. We have to look at our practices, look at them and see how they're affecting our population, and to the degree they are producing inequities or racialized outcomes, it has to be the work of government to address those. And so we consider ourselves as a government working for racial equity. And in fact, we are now, as a county government, members of an organization, the Government Alliance for Race and Equity, which is a national organization which has a membership of over 250 jurisdictions from across the country, who are really committed to naming the inequities that exist in their community and working very strategically and intently to address them as local government. And so One Fairfax is a policy, but it's also important to think about it as an approach to how we govern and manage the county. It's not a program, right? It's not something that just one thing that you do. It's really how you integrate that thinking about inequity and achieving equity into all of the business of government. Again, from a governance standpoint, as well as a management standpoint. it involves, as I said, facing our history. The reality is we are dealing with the byproducts of policies and practices and situations and conditions that have produced inequities that we see today, and they are affecting our current reality. But we do aspire to a brighter future for our jurisdiction, and so we acknowledge where we are. We become uncomfortable with the sort of current sort of racialized situation and make it a priority to establish policies and practices and make explicit choices that will advance more equitable outcomes. Now, that will require doing things differently in some cases, right? So we can't continue all the time to do the same things that we've always done, because that could likely produce the same results. So this is also could involve and should involve looking at bold and innovative approaches that will get us a different type of outcome, a more equitable outcome. And that we get by working very closely and openly with the community and other stakeholders in our community. So we, as members of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, are following their strategic framework for advancing equity. It's normalized, organized, and operationalized. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those concepts as in the upcoming slides. But very basically, normalized is just being comfortable acknowledging race, right? So it's not something that is often comfortable to talk about, but we have to be realistic when we look at outcomes for the population and realize that they vary significantly according to race and according to place in this county. So we need to be willing to name and acknowledge that as being of strategic interest for our county. We have to organize, right? So given that information, we need to organize ourselves as an organization, as our resources, in ways that can begin to address those racialized patterns of inequity that we see. And then finally, name the goals we want to achieve and begin to operationalize strategies that will help us to meet those goals. And as I said earlier, it may be that we have to course correct and change, but we maintain this sort of cyclical commitment to always working, aspiring to be a racially equitable community, because we have a vision, and that vision in Fairfax County is a vision of One Fairfax. So I wanted to introduce very quickly some of these concepts in ways that I'm hoping will be helpful to you in your work moving forward. Definitions are very important, and so we use certain phrases and certain terminology, and we want to make sure that people understand what we mean when we use these words. So the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion are sometimes used interchangeably. So we want to recognize that there is they're related, but there are significant differences in the concepts. Diversity is who is in the room, who is at the table, who is in the community. We celebrate the diversity of Fairfax County, but it doesn't necessarily reflect how people are doing, right? So when we think about how people are doing, that's when we think about inclusion. What is the experience of the diverse population in our community, at our various tables, in the various rooms that make up Fairfax County? But just being in the room and having your voice heard doesn't necessarily mean that you're changing outcomes, right? That those voices are contributing to a difference in policy and practice, which is then changing results for a population. And so we like to think about our work as being equity-focused work, not just about diversity, not just about inclusion, but ensuring that diversity and inclusion are fostering more equitable outcomes. Another term that's sometimes used interchangeably that I think is important to understand is the concept of equity versus equality. We like to talk about it as equity is fairness, not sameness. We want to ensure that people and frankly areas of the county are given what they need to thrive, not given the same thing. And this graphic is one that's been shared widely. It's not one that we can claim as specific to Fairfax County, but I do think it does a really good job of illustrating this basic concept. If you give each of the kids the exact same thing, it doesn't get them the ultimate goal, which is watching the ball game. But if you assign an appropriate resource to that kid based on their own situation and condition, they are able to achieve the goal. The challenge we found with this particular graphic, particularly in an area like Fairfax County, is that it fosters this notion of scarcity. It suggests that this kid on the left in the yellow pants has to give up something in order for the kid in the purple to be able to gain something. And so we reject that notion, right? Because we believe that, you know, fundamentally for One Fairfax, that we all do better when we all do better, and that it is possible for all people to thrive and live to their fullest potential. We just have to be thoughtful about the situations and conditions that we are accounting for as we are assigning resources and strategies to ensure folks are able to meet their goals. And so I think this graphic is a better representation of that concept, because what you'll notice is in this graphic is there are no differences in the size of the children. It's not about deficiencies in the people. What it is about an unjust system and structure. It's about an unlevel ground. It's about a sloped fence that serves as a barrier. So that's the emphasis of One Fairfax. Again, not addressing deficiencies in people, but acknowledging that the very ground, the very communities in which people are situated are unjustly structured. And we want to ensure that we are bringing opportunity to all the communities of Fairfax County to ensure that people have the opportunity to participate and thrive. And as I mentioned, race is at the core of it. And the reason, so the policy is a racial and social equity policy. So it's a racial policy because when we look across all the major indicators of life success, the one indicator, the one categorization that's most predictably not performing well is race. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other social categorizations, such as gender, such as ability, such as age, such as, let's see, there's lots of other social categorizations, veteran status. But the point is that when you look across all of the indicators of life success, which populations are predictably at the bottom? Most predictably, it's people of color. So that's why we center race. As we center race, though, we center it focusing not at the individual level of racism. So individual level racism is discrimination and bigotry, and we reject that, right? We don't want that for our community. We have systems and structures that exist within most institutions to address individual acts of bigotry and discrimination. What we want to become more adept at seeing is how racialized outcomes are perpetuated in our institutions. The broader institution of government, the individual departments of government, the institutions. So how are policies, practices, and procedures producing outcomes that are predictable by race, working better for one population, in this case, working better for white people than they do for people of color. We also want to recognize that institutions have a way of coming together and forming structures that can serve as barriers. And so we also look at structural racism. And so structural racism is this notion that there is transportation and housing and health and employment opportunities that get structured in communities in ways that make opportunity more available to some groups than they do to other groups. Now, this does not take away from, you know, the life experiences of individuals who may have worked very hard, who came from different backgrounds and, you know, had to, you know, sort of overcome their circumstances to achieve. But what it does say that there were systematic practices by government that served to produce barriers to opportunity based on race. For people of color, and historically in this country, that's indigenous people and Black people initially, and then that as our country diversified, that same those same barriers were put in place for other groups. But what it says is that race was the predicting factor. It was the reason why opportunities were assigned to different groups. So that's why we emphasize race, and that's why we really focus on the presence of institutional and structural racism. This is a brief presentation, and there's a lot. Jessica and Christine can tell you, we've been talking about these concepts for many years now. What I will offer to you is that if you have interest in learning more about why are we talking about race, what do you mean that there's something called structural racism? I would highly suggest watching this documentary. It's called Race, the Power of an Illusion. It was produced by California Newsreel about 10, maybe even 15 years ago. So it stands the test of time. It was a PBS documentary when it originally was produced. It's available online with a quick Google search. It's a 3-episode series, but I think it does the best job of really making up for what many of us did not learn through our education about the construct of race and how it was really used to justify economic exploitation in the separation of a population to assign advantage to one group and disadvantage to another group. And so I would encourage you to take a look at this video. If you ever have the ability to access the county's server, we have it available, or it's also available for rent online for a nominal fee. So would highly recommend it. And so we organize, when I said that the One Fairfax policy applies to all functions of Fairfax County government, I just include this here to represent that. Our elected officials took the major action in adopting the policy and directing that all functions of government would consider equity. And so now every department has an equity lead, has an equity team, has ambassadors trained who are able to train others in the organization. But beyond the important work that's happening in the departments, including work that's happening in the library system, you know, what we're really seeking is how can we bring together the work across all the various agencies to do what I think is, you know, probably the most critical aspect of this work, which is to unlock the potential of all residents in the county in all areas of the county. And so these actions that are being taken individually by different departments are really part of a puzzle that are coming together to create an opportunity structure in Fairfax County that is really intended to help us to become the equitable county I think we all aspire to. Community engagement, I've already talked about this, is really important because that's how we know how the doors of opportunity are opened and closed. If we continue to work in our silos and base our planning and our decision making only on the information that's right in front of us, and we don't listen to others who are impacted by policies, who have different lived experiences, who have different backgrounds, we are not really able to understand what this opportunity structure in Fairfax County looks like. we also don't know what the proper solutions are. So it's also important to be engaged with community, and I would consider the role you all play as a board of trustees an important part of this role of engaging the community. That's how we are able to better understand the voices and the perspectives and the experiences of the diverse group of residents that make up Fairfax County. As I'm sure you're aware, the county has or is in the process of adopting a strategic plan. And One Fairfax has also been a central element of the strategic planning process. One, in how we engage with the community to construct the strategic plan itself, but also in how we are aligning the various strategies of the strategic plan toward a common focus. So earlier in the slides, I noted these areas in the county that are so-called islands of disadvantage. So through the strategic planning process, we're really seeking to shift those islands of disadvantage into communities of opportunity, because we really want the work that's happening in our strategic plan, which is really designed to ensure that Fairfax continues to thrive 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. We want that to be inclusive of all neighborhoods in all populations. And so we have this focus on communities of opportunity, and we have this embrace of a concept called targeted universalism. So we set broad goals for success for our organizations, for our county, but we recognize that people are situated differently. And so while we adopt broad goals, we need targeted strategies to ensure that different neighborhoods and different populations are able to achieve those goals. So our focus is on targeted strategies aimed at building opportunity structures, which then promote people being able to live to their fullest potential. This concept of communities of opportunity, very quickly, is fairly basic. One is we want to understand, make it a part of our planning and decision-making, the actual vulnerability and opportunity that exists in Fairfax County, understanding that landscape, utilizing data, looking at maps, listening to the voices of community, but really taking into account what's happening in all corners of the county and allowing that to inform our planning and decision-making. To the degree that opportunity doesn't exist in certain areas of the county or is not available to certain populations, we want to build it. Where it does exist, but there might be barriers to accessing it, we want to be able to connect people to opportunity. One example that I use when I talk to different groups, so it's really good to use it with this group, is the example of the libraries eliminating or making the library cards accessible to all children in the county and eliminating the fees, right? So that is an opportunity. The ability to access resources from the library is probably the greatest opportunity available in any community. But we know that there were certain populations that weren't able to access that resource. So making a policy decision to decide that no, every child will have access and they will not be burdened by fees, which are often not their cause anyway, is a major equity decision. And that was something that the library system did early on in this process of the adoption of the One Fairfax policy, but I think is an excellent illustration of how do you bring opportunity to a community. And then we recognize that opportunity for the sake of opportunity is one thing, but that these opportunity structures really come together in ways that get us someplace. So what do I mean by opportunity? Opportunities are education. It's access to the library. It's access to transportation. It's access to food. It's access to parks. It's access to childcare. It's access to the internet and devices that allow people to participate in this new digital world. Those things come together to create pathways for people to participate in an inclusive economy. We want Fairfax County's economy the economy that makes us the strong county that we are, we want it to be more open to people. So when we're talking about One Fairfax and we're talking about fostering equity, part of that is about ensuring that people are able to support themselves, able to support their families, able to contribute to the community, and again, able to participate in the inclusive economy that is Fairfax County. So I offer you, in these final minutes, I just offer you a few ways to introduce some questions into your thinking that that possibly might be helpful to you in your work moving forward. So we often sort of start thinking about, wondering who's a racist, right? So this is not about naming who's a racist. What we are focusing on is figuring out what's causing the racial inequities that we see. I can tell you it's not the actions of an individual, right? It is normally the intersection of actions that are happening across systems that are producing the inequities that we see. So we're shifting from a focus on individual actions to a focus on what the system is doing. So what's causing the inequities? Understanding what actions have produced those inequities and the impacts of those inequities, what systems can be held accountable, and when I say accountable, it's accountable not in a punitive sense, but accountable in the sense that they need to be changed, right? There are actions that need to be taken to make change in that system so that that system will begin to produce better results. And that's really what our work is, being proactive in looking at information and taking in information to be proactive in the adoption of strategies and solutions. Here's another series of questions. I will not walk through all of these, but I offer these to you as, again, another example of how to ask yourselves questions in your day-to-day work that will allow you to begin to ingrain this focus on equity in your work. What is, I think, probably most significant in this is that we have to understand the outcomes we want to achieve. We have to understand the community level conditions that we aim to impact. And we do that through data. We do that through working with the community. But we have to aspire to see change through the actions that we take and then monitor our progress in achieving those outcomes and creating the change in the conditions that we hope to see. That's what really generates the equity work. It's not wearing buttons. Right now, I'm wearing a One Fairfax button and I'm happy to pass them around to anybody that would want one. That's a statement, right? That says that we believe equity is important. But until we begin to name the outcomes we want to see and the changes in our community conditions that we want to see, we're not doing the equity work. So I encourage you all to continue the work. You have a fabulous staff team who's doing amazing things. And I'm really excited at the idea of how you as a board can be working in alignment with the actions of staff to get to this idea of One Fairfax. This final, this is really just like an exercise that I sometimes do. We won't go through it. But I want you to just recognize, if you have a minute to just look at some of these things, these are common barriers to advancing equity. And I encourage you to think about where you may have seen these happening in your work. So often people are looking for the smoking gun, the racist action that needs to be addressed. And on occasion, that is what our focus is on. But really, what impedes our progress from achieving equity is really just being comfortable in the status quo, not being willing to change, not being willing to do things differently, not recognizing power differentials that exist in the community and exist in our organization, thinking that we're too busy to take on any additional work. Equity work is our work, right? It's not something additional. It's a way that we think about our work, just thinking about it through a different lens and more strategically. So think about that. Think about how, you know, things that are just sort of the natural ways that we do business are often things that stop us from really digging deep to understand if we're having the impact that we desire to have in terms of being an equitable community. So finally, One Fairfax is a commitment from the county and schools to consider equity. It's not a program, it's a process, right? It's a way of thinking. Equity is fairness, it's not sameness. Race matters, it's tough to talk about, but it matters. And I encourage everyone to do the work of becoming more comfortable acknowledging and talking about race. This is not about individual acts of bigotry. We don't like those, we don't want to see those, but that's not what we're working to address here. What we're working to address is what's happening through institutions and how institutional processes and procedures are producing racialized outcomes, perpetuating inequities, and we are all functioning as a part of institutions and systems. The government has a responsibility for advancing equity, right? I really feel as a public servant, it's my obligation to be working in ways that ensure that everybody in our community is living to their fullest potential. And if I'm going to commit to that, then that means I'm committing to the work of equity. But everybody has a role in considering equity in your work. We do it in different ways, but we all have a role. So with that, I did a lot of talking very quickly, but and this is a slide, and these slides I have made available to staff and can share them with you. These are some links to some of the resources that I mentioned, and as well as a link to the One Fairfax webpage on the county's website, which has some additional information.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fascinating. I know I learned a lot, and I think it's really interesting to think about the way the library is certainly poised to continue the work on this, as we are a presence in so many communities. And I'm especially interested in the idea of barriers. I know you named one of the fines, but I think sometimes when you get used to the services that you're providing, you forget to look at, okay, this is everyday business as usual for me, but what does it mean to someone, say, who's never been to a library, never called a library, never gone to a library website? How can I look at these aspects with a fresh eye to see what might possibly be a barrier? You know, I think that's a real important thing for us. And at that, I'd like to open that up to questions from any members of the board who might have questions. Feel free. Okay. Yeah. Gary, I think.
Oh, okay. Yes. I'd like Carla to react to an additional aspect. It seems to me that we're living through a gigantic, unanticipated, exacerbating factor, namely the inequity that results from trying to deal with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you, you know, if there was ever a question about the existence of inequity in our community, watching how COVID-19 has impacted the population so disparately is really evidence of the inequity that exists. When you think about who has the ability to work from home versus who has to continue to show up at work in front-facing jobs, there are clear differences that are predictable by race and are predictable by income. You know, who has access to adequate healthcare? Again, clear differences. Economically speaking, whose jobs were most likely to be lost as a result of the pandemic. So yes, I mean it's been a, you know, probably one of the most difficult things to work through, but also an amazing illustration of the presence of inequity in our community. There's very interesting data that we've compiled for in the county. I believe we actually have a link to it here that shows the areas, the actual neighborhoods in the county that are more vulnerable to the negative impacts of COVID-19. And again, both from a public health perspective, but also economically. And of course, it matches that same map from the beginning of my presentation, those same areas of the county that we know to be vulnerable and know to have lower levels of opportunity.
Thank you.
Liz, I see your hand up.
I have a couple of questions here. On the vulnerable areas on that map that you showed us in the beginning, have they been mapped to the map? Is there a map that I could see that shows, like for the Sully district that I'm in, what areas of vulnerability do we have in Sully? So that, again, I'd have a better understanding of that. And two, it might be for Jessica or you, Carla, have we looked at the libraries that we have in the county against where those vulnerable areas are to see where the holes are?
I can speak a little bit to that. One good example is when we opted to pilot the Library Equity Access Pass program, where kids in FCPS can get a virtual card that doesn't incur any fines. We chose to start that right next to the Woodrow Wilson Library and in the Justice Pyramid, knowing that that group might have a higher percentage of the population that could definitely use those cards. So we try and use the data that Carla and her crew put together to help us make decisions about where to start things. Eventually, we want to have them everywhere so that every community can be provided equitable services, but we really want to give opportunities for success where we can as well.
And what about the question on the libraries versus the vulnerable areas of the county in terms of, do we have one or more libraries in those areas, each part of the county?
Yeah, so we have a library within a 5-mile radius of every resident. So if you recall the map that Carla pulled up, many of those islands of disadvantage or areas of opportunity that we're looking at now are along the Route 1 corridor. They're in Herndon, kind of Bailey's Crossroads area, Culmore, Seven Corners. And we do have libraries in all of those areas. We don't have more in those areas, but we do have libraries in all of those areas. Yeah, and
that
Fran,
map, I'm sorry, the map that the first map I showed is from a report, but we have a much more active, interactive mapping capability that you can continue to add additional layers. So while some of these maps don't have the libraries listed, we can very easily do an overlay that shows the actual locations of the library. We can do an overlay that shows the supervisory district. So you can start to see how those areas show up with markers that have meaning to you.
Okay, on the overlays, is that something that I can control, or is that something we have to request from you, Carla?
So there's a public version of the COVID-19 vulnerability index where you have the ability, and I think the link that is in the PowerPoint that I shared has that link. Again, it might not have the supervisory districts, but it does show zip codes and things like that. But you can manipulate it to show socioeconomic status, race, housing, housing patterns, transportation. So the community has the ability to utilize it.
And I'll send around an email tomorrow morning that includes both the PDF file of Carla's presentation and a direct link to both the COVID map and the One Fairfax public site. Fran, you had hands up from Sujatha, Jane, Phil, and Miriam.
Hey, so who should we start with? Because I don't have that view I can see. So Sujatha, I guess I'll start with you. How about?
Okay. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just ask one at a time. You can go around and around. You had mentioned, Carla, about the equity leads. I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. When you said, are they I know that they have equity leads, say in Fairfax County Public Schools, each school has equity lead. Are you saying, who has equity leads?
The county government. So there is, I should mention that the county schools also have a chief equity officer position. In fact, they just hired a new chief equity officer.
Fantastic.
It was just announced the other day.
Yeah.
But so yes, so we have, while we jointly adopted this policy, because we're two different systems, we each have our own chief equity officers working on strategies unique to our respective systems. So the county government, each county department, each of the 40 plus county departments has an equity lead. And those equity leads were identified by the department director, work closely with the department director, and have been assigned to convene equity teams within each department. And those teams have developed equity plans specific to that department, supported by my team. And after a whole lot of training and technical assistance. And so they're different than the equity leads, if you're familiar with the equity leads on the school side, same name, but a much different process in structuring them and supporting them.
And do you, so within schools, say, so I just want to see what the difference is. Within schools, they do have equity teams in schools, varying levels of efficacy. For the most part, they do not work. They have not worked, and they have not really touched the issues in schools. So I imagine that when you're working with adults, it's different. Adults have more advocacy for themselves, you know, can file complaints for themselves. It's a very different kind of system. I'm wondering, do you have, like, what is their, have they formed actual committees? And I'm like, so library has an equity lead, I guess, and transportation and everything else. And libraries is the least of my concerns, because in general, library mindset is a particular mindset that is about offering to as many people as possible all the wonders of the world, I feel, right? So what do you think that it's effective? Because I also, in the schools, they have been sort of bereft of leadership for a while. I know they didn't have you, let's say. So I imagine that the leadership has been a little bit different. What do you expect of them? How is it working?
Of our equity leads?
Yeah, I mean, how your whole system is
the whole system. No, I mean, one of the things that was very clear when I took on this role a couple of years ago, that there would be no way I could do this work on my own. I think, appropriately situated, reporting to the county executive. So from a leadership perspective, I am situated on the county executive's leadership team. Literally, my office is right next door to the county executive. So I have the highest level of access to the county executive. I have the capacity through my small team to provide technical assistance, to support data analysis and community engagement. But what I lack is the specific business area expertise in each of the 40 plus organizations. So what my strategy was to develop a racial equity analysis framework and set of goals that the then departmental efforts could align to. And I've been beyond amazed at what has happened through the work of the departments. Again, Christine is the equity lead for the library system and can speak specifically about the work that they've been doing. Earlier today, I met with the equity lead in the leadership of the Department of Transportation, where they outlined some of the things that they're working on. I was blown away. I met with the Department of Public Works. I was blown away. So I would say the fervor and energy that the teams, and again, the equity leads and their leadership, right? So it had to be the director of the organization really embracing this and taking it on and integrating it into the work of the department that really then enabled the equity leads to take the training I was providing and bring it into the organization in a meaningful way. And that's happened across most agencies. Again, we're a large organization. There are going to be places where I wish we were making a bit more progress a little bit more quickly than we are. But overall, as a county of our size, I'm just blown away at what's happening. So we're in the second year of this process. There was an initial equity plan developed last year. In the teams, actually, Christine knows, the updated plans are due on November 30th. Well, I'll have an opportunity to see progress made since the previous year and new goals and initiatives that departments are working on. And we'll be reporting, bringing all that together and reporting out on that after I receive that at the end of the year, early next year. So yeah, I think that this structure is the type of structure that really ingrains this into how we do our work. Again, because if I go away tomorrow, this structure is built. And I don't want to go away tomorrow, and I think there's a lot more I'm contributing, but I feel very confident in the way that we've built this structure, because I feel like this now is not just my work, it's the work of everybody in the organization.
That sounds great. I think Jane had a question too. Is that right? Jane, did you?
Yes, Carla, thank you so much for staying late and sharing this presentation with us. It's so good. I've known about One Fairfax for a couple of years now. And so it's exciting to hear how it's evolving. And I think you had used the term ambassadors. And I think that as board members, we're all ambassadors as well, small a ambassadors. So to that point, I'm glad you're able to use the LEAP program of the Library Cards for Kids as an example. But as we go and talk to fellow community members, do you have any other examples that we can use to bring this to life? For example, something where there has been structural inequities that the county has already made a difference or made progress on, in addition to the library.
Wow, that's a great question, and I wish I would have done my homework
Really
to
put
be
you on the
able to give you the best answer possible. But what I will say is that I do consider you all as ambassadors. Because you'll have exposure to a level of insight and information that most people in a community won't have. And so your ability to take these concepts into your community to help people to really understand, the tension behind policymaking. One of the things that I'm sure the library staff can attest to is, we're finding that, while we all work in our sort of respective departments, when you start to dig down to the roots of what's driving the inequity that we see, we start to arrive at some common roots that aren't unique to a specific business area. We start to think about the housing affordability challenges and what that's meant to the county and how that manifests itself through, not just to the housing department, but, through transportation and schools and in health. And so helping other people in the community to broaden their awareness of the complexity of the policy choices that have to be made. I probably mentioned earlier, the tagline for One Fairfax is, we all do better when we all do better, right? So we want to help people to understand our shared interest and our shared benefit to be gained if all members of our community are able to thrive. In that previous slide where I showed the boxes and one kid lost a box, that's the typical narrative. That's the scarcity, zero-sum game narrative that I think is really, common in community and civic discussions. What do I have to lose for another community to gain? So helping people to understand that, part of making equitable choices is really contributing to better outcomes for a population, to ensure that our whole community is, sort of thriving. It is really, I think, that can't come from government. That has to come from other community members who get it. And so being willing to have those types of conversations with your neighbors, I think, is really important. There's a lot of misinformation sometimes about what equity means and why we're doing the things that we're doing. So when you're able to tie it to the work you're doing and the work that you're seeing happening in other segments of the county, being willing to share that with other people and help them to understand is tremendously valuable, because again, it starts to, I think, build up that middle group who really don't know much about what's going on, but once they know more, they can do and support more. And that's really who we want to activate as sort of our broader network of equity ambassadors.
Okay, great. And I think Phil, is that right? Phil, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for your remarks. One of the areas that my concerns are, brothers and sisters who are here, many of them as illegal immigrants in our country, and we welcome them, and I welcome them. The problem, they're here, and we're addressing this diversity issue, but they can't get good jobs. They're taken advantage of, by the employers here. And I'm wondering, like, what we're doing in that area. My present friend, came from Ecuador. They come on she came on a tourist visa. She overstays her time. And then, she was selling cars, so they wanted her to work 6 or 7 days a week. Okay. She gets paid commission, no hourly rate, no overtime. Presently, this evening, she changed jobs. She's working at a hookah bar in DC, okay, primarily for tips. So are we able to do anything to help this segment of people? A number of them are, I'm sure, in these areas that we've mentioned, but I have a number of close friends who, again, came their choice, and I'm going to use the term as illegal immigrants. And I empathize every day with the problems that, they do. We welcome them to come, but then there's not much help, you understand, we're giving them, and they're taken advantage of every single day. So if you have any thoughts on that particular subject, because this is part of this one Fairfax problem that I don't think we initially touched on significantly.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's an excellent representation of the intersecting roles of local government, state government, and federal government. So, there are issues around or challenges in current immigration policy that at the federal level, which have created a situation where we have people in our community who are not able to attain legal status. But at the local level, what do we do about that? Well, we can't affect change directly in terms of their status, right? So our local officials can advocate for policy change at the state and local level. And so we like to think of the equity work as not always sort of direct action in the form of program and policy, but advocating to people who have the power to make change in policy. And so on an issue like illegal immigration in people who are undocumented, I think the focus becomes, okay, here's the current situation with federal policy. So from a One Fairfax perspective, what can we do to advocate for policies that would create pathways for for legal residency, right? So that's one thing. That's going to take a while. It's not, it's not under the control of Fairfax County government. So in the meantime, we take other actions that would ensure that people living in our community are able to do so comfortably and safely. And, so we look for, we can put in place things that look for situations where people are being taken advantage of. There are, there's probably, you all might be aware of, people who are undocumented finding themselves living in certain living situations, paying exorbitantly high rents because, so there are certain things that we can look out for that are counter to our local policy and address it at that level. But it's a perfect example of there's only so much we can do at the local level to address some of these challenges. Some of the actions have to be taken at the federal or state level. And frankly, some of the actions have to be taken by the private sector. And so what are the things that need to be implemented in the private sector to address some issues? And so, these are sort of multi-pronged approaches that are necessary to advance equity and really are not singularly always the responsibility of local government. But it is important to be aware of where else change can be affected and what other avenues we have as local government to affect the changes that need to happen.
I think also it's an example of what you were talking about with partnerships with nonprofits and perhaps churches and institutions, because it also has that institutional definition of someone as illegal.
Yeah.
What's their crime?
Yeah.
Now, did I miss anyone else who had a question?
So I was Fran.
Yeah, and then
Miriam.
Still, yeah.
I think this is probably a topic for another night because of the time. But I think at some point, especially since we have a number of new members of the board, it would be interesting to go back and look at the library strategic plan, which Jessica, spearheaded with a whole bunch of our staff people, 2 years ago, I think now. And how, something like that, and how that also aligns with One Fairfax and using that as guiding principles when we talk about, how does it become real within at least the library universe. So I would suggest I'll just put it out there as a possible future topic, but I think it's a bit much to go through tonight.
I think that's a great idea. And I was also thinking of hearing from Christine sometime about the team and that as well. And so Priscilla's next, and I think Sheila, and then I'm not sure we may want to wrap it up in terms of time, but go ahead, Priscilla.
Thank you. I appreciated the overview of the global picture, and I'm really mainly right now interested in a little bit more information about our library system and some next steps with our library system. I know that we've worked really hard to get acknowledgement that one very basic inequity is the physical access to the library due to hours. And we were very close, and then areas out of our control came, and so that was taken back. But I'm wondering versus if we are not able to do the hours across the board, which was the original request, if we might relook at the strategy to those areas of opportunity to expand those hours in areas where we know that there are populations that may not have the ability to have that transportation there. I know in Fairfax County Public School library programs, we've been very focused on providing curbside checkout, but not just curbside checkout. We've leveraged our bus and transportation system in a very grassroots way to make sure that as many of our communities can have book deliveries based on the bus stops. And in some cases, we even have intrepid librarians. One was just featured on NBC4, who just have the ability to deliver to homes the materials. And I remember a while back, there was a comment about, or a suggestion that we may be able to have a mobile library. I know we have a temporary setup pop-up library, but thinking about the the bookmobile idea, or maybe as a mitigation strategy to have ways that the library can reach out beyond the physical walls and beyond technology, which is its own inequity as we go along. And lastly, I know I'm super excited in kind of a nerdy way about the Library of Things that's coming. And I'm wondering if equity at the center in the decision of what Library of Things might be available for people to check out for free that they may not be able to afford, that could affect their opportunities and their quality of life at home even, and afford them the ability to explore different things. I mean, it's exciting for us to all have like different novelty cake pans, but it might be good for us to think too about things that actually can make a difference that people can borrow that they wouldn't otherwise actually have access to. So that was me kind of talking and not asking a question. My global question is, and doesn't have to be answered right now, but what is next for our library system to do some practices and actions beyond all of us understanding the collective need that there is and acknowledging that what's coming up next.
Right. That's good. And Sheila, did you want? You have to unmute yourself. Unmute. Unmute.
Okay, there I go.
There you
Very
go.
quickly, Carla, I love One Fairfax, and we've been hearing about it and thinking about it. Your in-depth definition and exploring exactly what it is very exciting. And I agree with Miriam. I think this is a topic for another meeting. I just want to say very quickly that there's a whole middle ground of people in the community. I'm just going to use the food drives right now. People are tripping over themselves to give food to the food drives, but it's just a one-time activity. And what this is about is the progress, it's the procedure. And we as ambassadors being on the board, I think that we also need to find ways to kind of ignite the community's goodwill. And the library has many, many things that we do make available. And I think that it's time to kind of explore them, maybe go back and figure out ways to make the access to the library that we worked so hard on last year. So I think this is a topic for at least one more board meeting, maybe more. So, but thank you very much for this.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. And once again, Carla, thank you so much. And I think we will, yes, we can all do our applause or the little icons too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the invitation and look forward to hearing about the great work happening from the library.
And I think we'll definitely need to have you come back. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for future working together, definitely.
Yes, please, Jessica and Christine know how to find me. And if you have any questions, again, reach out through my contact information, which is embedded in that PowerPoint.
Okay, great. We sure will. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now we'll move on to the minutes. I had sent in.
Can I ask you a question? I'm so sorry.
Something short.
Is Library of Things a thing I'm supposed to know about? Is that real? Library of Things?
Oh, library. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Very briefly, the library pre-pandemic was exploring a pilot Library of Things, which is like a non-traditional collection of stuff that people can check out. We had some delays due to COVID, but we are continuing forward with that process. The Oakton Library was planning to pilot based on a community survey of what types of materials would be helpful. And it appears that it may be science equipment, because there's a science themed school near the facility. So they could check out like beakers and those things that make tiny things look bigger that I'm not remembering the name of right now. Microscope.
There you go.
Too late for me. Anyways, we'll be happy to talk about that more later, but yes.
Thank you.
Well, it's sort of along the line of the Fix-It clinics, but we're not going to go into all of that right now. Just to whet your appetite. Okay, so now back to the boring business at hand of the minutes. I had sent in a few commas and periods to be looked at. Does anybody have any additions or corrections that they would like to mention right now? Phil?
Move they be approved. Phil?
I'm sorry?
Moving that we approve the minutes.
Oh, what? I didn't even ask for that. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second.
I second.
And all in favor? I started to say all opposed.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, and now we move to the chair's report, which I do not have one. Aren't you glad? And moving on to committee reports. The Library Foundation, Suzanne, anything?
Nothing new. We haven't met.
Okay,
Will
thank
be
you.
next month, I believe.
Yeah, December 8th is the next board meeting. Miriam's Finance Committee, any? Not, okey doke.
No, we
Out-
didn't meet. So
Okay.
no.
Outreach, Brian, I know you all met. You have the biggest
Yes.
committee. You're the most
Oh, wow,
popular
yeah.
committee.
Yes, we met and we have our next meeting set for February 19th, so we're well ahead. One of the things we're doing is let's see, you put up there, Jess? Good.
Yeah.
Okay, we put out these talking points as we've done before. This is for the winter, December through February. There are three main points of programs that we're running, or the library is running. And one is something we have very little control over, and I'll talk about that last. I would suggest that you take a look at these talking points, which will be sent to you after this meeting. Jessica, I think, is taking care of that, or Christine? Yeah. He's nodding yes. And when you communicate these things to your supervisor and others, I would suggest that you do them in order. The first one, the food for fines, is all of December. This is very important. So this, I would suggest, would be the first thing you communicate to them so they can put it into their newsletters or whatever, what have you. And you can read all the points here. It's for the entire month. It's similar to what we've done before. Everybody except Access Services, of course, will be drop-off sites for food and donations. So I think that's very important. Do you have anything to add on that one, Jessica or Christine?
No, I think those are the major points.
Is this
So I
list
think we're all
gonna get emailed out to us then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be, yes. So that's the first one. Following that are two things that are coming up in January. So again, I would suggest, and what I'm going to do is save those back a little bit and then pass them on to the supervisor in the future, probably during December. The first is the eBook of the Month Club, which is an interesting thing. It's new and starting in January. It'll be a selection of a couple books. For January, there are two of them, an adult book, The Only Woman in the Room, which is a nonfiction book about who? I looked at it and I forget. Jessica, you can tell me.
The Only Woman in the Room is a fictionalized account of a person whose name I can't remember, but it's set, it's during like Nazi Germany.
Ah, that's right.
Oh, what is her name? Anyways, later.
Remember, anyway. Yeah. But then there's a young adult book, Dara Palmer's, and whether this will continue with an adult, young adult book or any additional type books, maybe fiction, nonfiction, will be seen, but it starts in January. So it'll be good. And the best thing is that the titles will be offered to anybody without a waiting list. So anybody who wants to join this book club, I guess there'll be some sort of a sign up, right?
These are going to be available through the Overdrive Libby site. So you can read it as an individual, you can participate as a book club, whichever your preference is.
Okay, good. And then the Winter Reading Challenge is the other thing that starts in January, a little bit after New Year's. And I think the important thing here is that it has a winter, whoops, did you move it? What did you, oh yeah, there you go. That it'll be for children and so forth. And there's a one Fairfax story time, which is coming up sometime during 2021, but not necessarily in conjunction with the winter reading. Right?
No, and we have we've officially settled on a name for this. This is a placeholder. So this series is going to be called One Community, Many Stories, and we'll be doing one program a month under that title.
Okay. Okay, but starting sometime after January.
The first one will be mid to late January.
Okay, Okay. Anyway, these are all the things that we have control over. So I think that those would be good to talk about after you talk about the December fine, food for fines. And then the last thing is the RB digital transitioning to overdrive. Several of us were interested in that from a personal standpoint. I use magazines. I think Jane worried about it too, but I am told that what will happen here is there's nothing we can do about it. Overdrive bought RB Digital. They're going to bring everything into them. That's the way it goes in business. And we'll have to learn to live with it. But everybody who has holds on RB Digital, and there shouldn't be that many, I don't think, because most of the books are older and don't have holds on them, will be told that when they're moving over, they'll have to make the holds again on overdrive, and they'll be told how to do that. Similarly, when the magazines move over, which is in the future, they'll be told specifically how to handle that. Is that right, Jessica?
There are approximately 1,700 individual holds in RB Digital right now. And unfortunately, we are unable to transfer those holds over. So RB Digital users have already received one generic email giving them a heads up that it's coming. And then a second one will go out when we have a firm date for transition. And it'll give a little additional information about if the item is available in Libby right now, they should go put their hold on it now because you want to get in line for it. And if it's not, as soon as it transitions over, you're going to want to go put yourself back in the hold line.
Okay. So anyway, these are the talking points. They will be emailed to you most Scotia. So you'll be getting those. Okay. The only other thing we did in the outreach meeting, well, I mean, we talked a lot, but the paper annual report is out in paper for some of us. And I, for example, wanted 10 of them. I asked that they be sent to Burke Center. They came to Burke Center in mail. There you go. Frank got hers, but that's because she's the boss. See, and they're very nice. They're good. Anyway, please let Jessica know, or Christine, if you haven't already, how you want these to get your copies, since we can't just be handed them, which we would normally be at an face-to-face meeting. And then use them, share them with your supervisors and so forth. So that's all I have for outreach.
Hey, Liz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, is it appropriate to put some copies of the annual report in the libraries themselves? I didn't know.
So we have distributed copies to the branches as well.
Oh, they already.
Not a ton, but
that's not part of our up to 20 that we request. Okay, so.
Plus, there's a link that Jessica sent out to the online version, which is
right.
I was thinking my supervisor has an area outside of her office for like putting things in. I was thinking that would be appropriate. Is that correct? That would be to put some extra copies there?
Well, it's up to your supervisor. I would suggest you give a few copies to them. I'm going to personally, for Braddock District, speak to my representative or a member of the staff who handles libraries and so forth, and ask how many they want.
Okay.
And I'll let them know and get it to them.
Is there a deadline on when we need to report back how many copies of up to 20 that we are requesting?
No, just whenever you know how many you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's it for outreach this time.
Compliments on whoever put this together, by the way.
It was
wonderful marketing staff. We'll pass that along.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Sheila.
That's okay.
Policy Committee, Sheila.
Okay, the Policy Committee met on November the 6th, and we reviewed Policy P, which is on naming and renaming libraries. And we also reviewed the bylaws. And I think the one significant thing about Policy P is that Jessica has learned that we do have the authority to name or rename a library facility. You should have both Policy P and the bylaws in your packet and review them. And therefore, for consideration, we will have them at the meeting on December for you to approve and to discuss them. So for now, you just need to read them over. And our next meeting is going to be December the 8th, and we're going to be reviewing Policy W, which has to do with parking lots and camping and using the outside of the library. And we will also be drafting language regarding electronic meetings, which has also been added to our bylaws, which we didn't have to use before COVID. So read our revisions and be ready to vote on them in December or to discuss them.
Okay, Liz?
Yeah, Sheila, if we have, I've read them over for this
Okay.
meeting because I thought we might be discussing them tonight. If I have questions and or suggestions for changes or input on what I've seen here, do I call you up or make contact with you, or how do I handle that?
Sheila, why don't I answer?
Yeah, why don't you answer?
And I was gonna do that when we got down to the consideration item, but the procedure is that it's first presented as a consideration item. In other words, this text of the existing policy and bylaw and the existing, and then the proposed changes. They're presented without comment as a consideration item. And then at the next meeting, they will be discussed and amended, discussed, voted on, all of that. And the reason for that is that anything that members of the public may want to participate in a discussion has to be advertised, if you will, at a meeting previously or prior to a meeting of discussion. That way, we've had that issue before about people bringing up things and perhaps wanting a discussion, but because we're a board that is responsible to the public, we can't really have a discussion on a topic until we've notified the public so that they have an opportunity to sign up to participate. So that's why I know when I was a brand new trustee, I thought, this is so slow. First, it's there just to read, and then you wait a whole month to talk about it. But that's the reason, because we're not the only people who need to read it and discuss it and decide, and we will decide on it. But okay, so it's for the public content. I think I've overly explained it, but are you good with that? Got it?
Well, I hate to take up our time in the meeting for me to be educated in terms of why something is there versus, you know, I would like to recommend a change to it. There's a difference between just understanding behind it versus making a, you know, I'd like to see this change to be such and such.
But I would say that that's part of the discussion that
Okay.
involves the public.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. So policy, thank you. And now the director's report.
Sure. So first, the Only a Woman in the Room book is about Hedy Lamarr. That's the name I could not recall. My thanks to Erin, our marketing director, who found the information and emailed it to me in that time in between.
Great support.
The items that were part of your packet, you already heard about the RB digital transition. We included it in both places because we know it's important and we are sure that people are going to be not super thrilled about it. So we want you to have lots of opportunities to hear the information, absorb it, and help us buffer it a little bit. But the other two items are simply an update about the 2020 bond. I wanted to publicly thank the Library Foundation for all of their efforts in supporting moving that forward. And a reminder for this board that even though the bond has been passed, it can certainly take a little bit of time to move things forward. So if you have facilities in your jurisdiction that were part of that bond process, it typically takes about 2 years after the passing of the bond for the county to go through the design and construction document process. So if you are Fran and the George Mason Library is up for renovation, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Fran already knows this, but it will likely happen 2023 or beyond. And we do have a lot of input and participation, and you all will likely be getting presentations from county partners like the Capital Facilities Group as it progresses. So we'll keep you up to speed on those. There's also a reminder in there that the second annual Staff Excellence Awards will be happening in 2021. So Fran will likely be appointing a committee for that at your next meeting. And we anticipate that the nomination period will be the first 2 weeks in February leading up to Valentine's Day, which, you know, because people love library folks and they want to share that love at that point in time. So more information at your next meeting about that. The only other couple of updates are we have added, in collaboration with the county's health department, we've added 2 additional parking lot only COVID testing sites. I think the last meeting I mentioned that we've been doing this at the George Mason branch for a couple of weeks now. And starting tomorrow, we will be doing it at the Centerville branch. And starting next week, we'll be starting at the Richard Byrd facility. These are only in the parking lots. They are meant to be very, very localized, walk-up participation, drive-up participation from local community members. So they will not be advertised. We won't be putting them on our social media accounts. They really want to, they don't want people driving down from New York for this. And the same structure as we have at George Mason. It's done entirely in the parking lot. None of the materials come into the library. The health department did a wonderful job of creating some additional signage so that people don't just wander into the library assuming that that is where the testing will take place, that they actually go through the process and find a little tent in the parking lot. We've been really happy with the partnership at George so far, and we don't anticipate any issues at the other facilities using that same model.
Jessica, when will it be at Centerville?
Starting tomorrow.
For all for this week only?
No, we do not have an end date yet. It depends on the health department's needs, community transmission, all those kinds of things. And the schedules are a little irregular. The health department has been extremely gracious in working with us on scheduling around times that work well for our public usage. And every one of those 3 locations is a little bit different. It is only Monday through Friday. Some afternoons, some mornings, it varies across the board.
And I'll just add, they have on the signage, they have the phone number for the health department. So I think that's a really good thing. If people drive in and they want it, they want to know when they can call.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's up to them, not us.
Is it advertised on the health department's website or on our website or on both?
It's not really advertised at all. And that was their goal. They want the local community to go and use it. So a lot of word of mouth.
All right.
Yeah. Following up briefly on Carla's presentation, at Fran's request, we have been putting together future presentations for the board that are focused on the library's work around One Fairfax. So we do have presentations lined up for December, January, and February for you all to hear more about the direct impact that our facilities and staff are having around that area. In December, you're going to hear a little bit about a program that started at the Thomas Jefferson branch called Reading Help Online, or Ayuda de Lectura. And we really kicked that off after COVID started, and it was meant to be an additional reading support group for youth in the community that had been coming into our facilities. It's a small but mighty little group, and you'll hear more about it then. In January, staff at the Patrick Henry Library are going to talk about the Safe Spaces training that they conducted for all staff about making our facilities welcoming to the LGBTQ+ community. And in February, staff at the Dolly Madison Library are going to talk about their Socrates Cafe program, which is meant to bring different community members together to talk about diverse topics that may be harder to kind of work through, where people have divergent opinions. So that's what you can expect coming up on those topics. Additionally, I think most of you know this, but just in case, I'm going to be here through the end of the week, and then I'll be on maternity leave. So Christine has been gifted ultimate authority for everything while I'm gone. She's going to wield it appropriately. I just know it.
You're going to be back on December 5th, so it'll only be for a week.
You continue to say that, and it continues to be wrong, but I appreciate your tenacity. So I'll send around pictures once stuff actually happens, but I'm planning to be around through the end of this week. So if I am delayed in responding to you after Thanksgiving-ish, that is why. So that is my report for today.
Oh, Liz.
Yes, I have a question for Jessica. On those Staff Excellence Awards, that's in February. Is that potentially okay to communicate that through our supervisor newsletter, that this is going to be happening in February, and any information about how do they nominate somebody if they're interested?
Sure. So the nomination period is very likely to be February 1st through the 14th. You are welcome to share that with your supervisors. We don't have our marketing materials done yet, but you can share all the information you'd like. The Staff Excellence Awards themselves will be at the Library Board's March meeting, whether or not it's in person or virtual. And the nomination process, like the previous year, will be both online and in person. So we'll have a template, like a Microsoft form up on our website and promote it through social media and other locations. So people can just go type in what they'd like. Or if they're in a facility, we'll have paper forms and we'll enter it online on their behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to consideration items. And the first one is to consider naming a library conference room at John Marshall for Will Jasper. And I just want to share a few, oopsie, something happened. Oh, what's going on?
I was going to bring it up for you so you had it available, but I've got too many tabs. So
okay, well, in the meantime, I will read. I was just going to read a little bit about Will in case people, didn't know that much about him. But he was a former board member. He died on October 4th, and I printed out his obituary because I was amazed at all of his accomplishments, and I'm just going to share a few of them because it would be too much. But he was born in Brooklyn, West Virginia in 1936. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from West Virginia State College, where as a member of ROTC, he received a commission through the Army Medical Service Corps. After graduated, he served in Vietnam as an advisor to the Vietnamese in 1966 and 1967. In 1969, he was assigned to the Walter Reed Army Medical Center as the Director of Management Information Systems Division, and in 1972 received a Master of Science degree in Management Information Systems from the American University. He had a long and distinguished career, but found time to volunteer in the county, including 25 years as a lead district election poll worker. I mean, I did that for 2 or 3 years, and that was enough for me. So that's amazing, I think. He became an honorary Lord Fairfax in 2006 as the Board of Supervisors recognized his volunteer service. And I know he will be missed by the many people his life touched, and even more so by his family. And I think, I remember him as just a wonderfully affable man who, just served so well. So that's one of the reasons that we're going to be considering this. So now the exact procedure here, I read this, is that right?
You don't have to read the whole thing.
Good. Okay,
no.
good.
No, this is not required by FOIA to be read into the record. So.
Okay, so everyone, be sure you have read this before next month, because we will not be doing remedial reading. We will be doing discussing, she said sternly, and even more sternly for the next ones. Okay, moving on. But first, does anybody want to? Well, no, next month, we'll talk about Will. Okay. Policy P regarding the naming of libraries. So as mentioned before, here is, the recommendation, the background, so you can read that. Also part of your, in your packet is, I think it's coming up, here is the current one. Okay, so you can read all of that, or you can just skip right away to, here's what we propose, because this has what we've crossed off. I say we because I went to those meetings with the policy committee, but it's the work of the policy committee. Changes that we are recommending. So this is really important for you to read and think about before you come to the meeting, she said again sternly. Okay, next policy is also from the committee. It's updating the trustee bylaws. Now, this is a lot to read, so you probably can trust your committee. Because it takes a special kind of person who likes to work on bylaws, but here we are. Look at you yawning, I see that. Every few years, it's really important to look at your institution, your organization's bylaws, because things get outdated. And I'm just going to say, as an aside, one of the things that jumped out at me, and Miriam, you're going to love this, is that the chair takes over right after the election. And I'm like, that is rough to just take over in the middle of a meeting. And I don't want anyone else to have to do that. Okay, end of my discussion, not really cricket. Don't put that in the minutes. Okay, so that's it for the consideration items. And now it's time for the round table. So let's go around in order and I will call on you on the order and we start with Brian. It'll be the same order, like of your district.
Okay.
So Brian, how about you
Yeah.
start?
No problem. Braddock District here. The two libraries, well, three, I guess, Access Services, Kings Park and Brook Center are all operating well. They haven't had to be closed too often, at least for facility problems. In the ongoing book sales are proceeding. They're just smaller than normal because of the population of people who actually come to the library. On October 31st, on Halloween, we got permission at Burke Center to go outside and have a book giveaway. We called it a book giveaway. Boo, haha. And any young person, they were children and young adult books. Anybody who came up with masks on were allowed to choose one book and get it free. And then the parents were hanging around anyway. And if they looked at the ongoing books, they bought some of those. So we sold a few books. We gave quite a few away. And the important thing, I think, is that it got people who hadn't really thought about coming up to the library to come to the library and see that we're open and so forth. So that was a good outreach. Other than that, I really don't have anything else for Braddock District. We're happy. Thanks.
Okay, Providence, Miriam.
I had a nice conversation with Dahlia just about what's going on with the library while, everybody is still at home. She's very enthusiastic, as are all of our supervisors, but she's particularly enthusiastic about anything that we're doing for young children, especially in this time of COVID. So, her staff is very supportive. One other thing I wanted to show you, you can't even see it because it's glass, but the Virginia Library Association sent me the award in a big, huge box. So this is what it looks like. And thank you again, Jessica, for putting in that nomination. Supposedly there'll be a dinner next year, but by then they'll have new awardees and it's all good. It's all good. But I did want to show that. And, Jessica, we won't say anything because it's, but we will miss you. We'll just say that. We'll miss you and we'll celebrate with you when the time is right.
Well, you can bring that when we do meet. You need to bring that, and you need to always have it in front of you.
Always. Forever.
Right.
We should all
Forever,
just have big
always.
piles.
That's right. It's great.
We could get her a lanyard that will hold it.
That's right.
Now on my list next is at large. Jane.
I would like to wish Jessica well, and I'd like to wish Christine well in working with us during Jessica's absence. I would also just like to shower praise on Priscilla. We have about 200 schools and about, 200 school libraries. And the libraries are really on the forefront of trying to help fill some needs of our kids while they can't get into school. And we have a ton of passionate school librarians who are doing just what Priscilla said, doing curbside pickup, organizing bookmobiles, seeking book donations from the community and going out and giving book drops to children who can use them. That's what we do at our school, and we are having great success. Children are hungry for learning. So there's so much going on with the school libraries. So many books have been lost. I'm sure with our library as well, with the lockdown, there are just books out in the ether, and it's got big consequences for the schools. So all of that rolls up to Priscilla, and she has set an environment and really enabled the school librarians to do what they do best. And it's a ton of pressure. And it's a ton of work. And Priscilla, I just want you to know how appreciated you are. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you. Suzanne Levy, Fairfax City. Mute, unmute, unmute.
I just did.
Okay.
I'm not fast with my mouse at this time of night. Anyway, I just want to wish Jessica well, and Christine, we know you can do it and it'll be fun to work with you. And happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And congratulations to Miriam on her well-deserved award.
Mhm. Thank you. Sujatha, Drainsville.
Hey, everybody. Again, I do wish you very, very well. I think it's going to be great. You're going to have a super easy baby. That I know. I have a feeling. I have only gone to visit the Great Falls Library, which I went with Jessica. She took me and introduced me, and it was lovely. I did want to just, in Drainsville, we had several locations that were early voting sites. And that was something kind of interesting. Like, I know that every round of elections, the electoral board has a different system in place, I think, depending upon how many days of early voting you would have. And this year was especially, it was new, right? We had more days of early voting. We had more absentee, the curbside voting. So it was a big deal. We had long lines all over the place. And, you know, I think that it would be nice if in future, you know, I think that we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. And I think it would be a great idea if we sort of thought about working with our electoral board to maybe use our spaces a little bit more effectively around the county, that are libraries, that are our spaces anyway, because there were long lines all over. Great Falls had long lines, Herndon had long lines. The spaces weren't maybe used as effectively as they might have been. And so that's one thing I wanted to say. And besides that, it looked like everything was great as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know because I haven't been everywhere yet. So I'm hoping to go to Herndon and pick up my annual reports and do my tour of Herndon this week. And then before Thanksgiving, it would be great if I was able to manage to get into the other locations as well. So, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Hunter Mills, Sheila. What happened to Sheila? Well, there she is. Sheila, you are not visible and you're muted.
Myself visible. Who cares? Oh, there I am. Okay, congratulations. This is fast. Congratulations, Miriam. Best wishes, Jessica. Can't wait to work with you, Christine, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Lee District, Keith.
I guess I want to echo what a lot of folks have said. Congratulations, Marion, on the award there. Jessica, good luck with the next, I guess, couple of weeks. And you've been very helpful. I mean, and made my transition very easy, as well as Fran. So thank you for that. I had a chance to visit both of my libraries. And I'm so fortunate that both branch managers are very good and gave me a tour and gave me more information than I probably needed, but was very happy to get. And lastly, I want to say thank you for inviting Carla Bruce to this conversation. I mean, it's, you know, frankly, I'm still learning. And every time I sit down and talk to someone who has more information than me on diversity, equity, inclusion, it's a great thing, you know, and so I really am very happy that the board got that presentation. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Let's see, go down the list. Gary Russell, Mount Vernon.
Well, this time I'm unmuted, but I don't have anything new to add.
Okay, thank you. Priscilla, representing the school board. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. That was very generous of you, and I'll send you a note later. I really appreciate that. What I really wanted to say is more along the lines of giving some shout outs to what is always the excellent leadership that I find whenever I interact with Fairfax County Public Library staff and administration. And the latest example is it's been a joy to collaborate with Ted Cabbage and Hallie Jackson, who we had some powwows before our big kickoff for the school and public library partnership meeting that we had this week. We decided we were going to relaunch and reset. And it was a great fun to plan with them, and even more fun to bring together such an enthusiastic group of people. So the purpose of this group is to find ways in which we can collaborate across. There is no divide. The divide on paper, because we're all librarians, but our work locations may be different and our missions may only be slightly different. And anyway, I did want to just say thank you to Erin Geyer, Renee Costello, Rebecca Takis, and Devin Paris, who have all enthusiastically volunteered to work with us, as well as our counterparts on the school library. And I think Hallie was the one who said that this meeting was a purveyor of joy, which I don't know how many meetings I can say that about. So that's a real gift in and of itself. So hopefully by, perhaps not by the next meeting, but we will try at the next meeting to give you a little bit more information about the actionable goals that we have established. But our purpose this time was just to get to know each other, reset, and figure out exactly the best ways we can work together collaboratively. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and wishing everyone the best.
Okay, thank you. Next, Liz Walker, of Sully District.
I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure of being able to make the connection between the Fairfax County Democrats and the Library Foundation with the yard signs for the early voting sites and the precincts on November the 3rd. We weren't able to get a sufficient number of yard signs for the Library Foundation of for the bond for all of the precincts, but by gosh, we had the majority of them out there. And the Fairfax Democrats put them out and picked them up and returned them when they were in good shape. So that worked really well. The second thing is I want to give kudos to Helen, and I'm always hard on her last name, Ignachenko, our librarian at Centerville. I had the distinct pleasure for the first time to be an election officer for early voting. And I worked at the Centerville Library, and Helen was absolutely superb and gracious in helping us. Almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody of the election office personnel were newbies. And she was a newbie, that we had never used that Centerville Library as a site before. Our voters parked in the library curbside voting pickup. They walked into the library looking for the drop box. We took over the hallway because we had so many crowds to be able to process people faster. Again, Helen was absolutely wonderful. Jessica and Christine, again, always cooperative, gave us up her space. We took over the kitchen, the small little kitchen there. But she really, really was a pleasure to work with. So thank you. And if you would pass that on, I'm sure the next time I see her, I will say the same thing to her. But again, new site, never been done before, and she was great.
Thank you, Liz. And Springfield District, Phil Rosenthal.
I want to second the thank yous and the congratulations to everybody with the awards, and Jessica with the new baby. About 3 weeks ago, I went by the public library and I took some snacks, for the staff, and they were very, very appreciative of that. Then about a week later, I met with Yolanda Atkins, who's the Friends of the Library president, and we met in the library and we're having a discussion, and Jessica noticed, I think I took my Starbucks coffee and I was sort of sitting in the back, and she came over and informed me I wasn't supposed to have. Yolanda said, well, we had, talked to the manager and it was okay. We were sitting way back in the corner, just discussing library stuff. So the young lady that was working there, she was on the ball to keep an eye that we weren't violating the things. So again, I enjoy being on the board. I take my responsibility seriously. I try to keep in touch with Yolanda. I stop by the library at different times. I sent myself a text that again, moving up to Thanksgiving, Christmas, I want to stop by there because they really appreciate it. I just bought some candy at the store I was with and went by, but they seem very, very appreciative of it. And I thank them because these are the people that are on the front lines during all this problem. And I appreciate the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Phil. And I will speak for Mason District. First, I want to thank the friends in TJ, Mason, and Woodrow for taking signs, bond signs around the neighborhood. They were everywhere and it was really great. And I had on my list to give a shout out to Liz for her work with FCDC and the signs, because TJ was an early voting site. And I would go out there and the bond signs were up, and I knew that that we hadn't put them up because TJ put them around the neighborhood. And so then I saw the Mason District Democrats collecting them. I said, where did you get those? Where did you get those? And they said, well, we just have them. They didn't know why, but they knew they had them and they put them up. So then when I found out that it was you, I really, that was a brilliant idea. And I was like, oh, I wish I'd thought of that. That was great. The other thing, I was in TJ the other day and talking to Tracy, Volunteer Friends. And I found out that the Reston Library had sent 5 boxes of gift books to TJ to sell because they're not taking donations anymore. And I sort of whispered to her and I said, do you want me to bring you a box? Because I have stuff in my home. And she's like, no, it's not allowed. It's not allowed. And then she said, we've got 5 boxes from the Reston Friends. So I know how the friends cooperate with each other across the system. And I often don't think about it. But then when I hear about it, it's like, yeah, this is it's a great organization, and the cooperation that goes on there is really terrific. So I was going to announce about next meeting, but Jessica's already taken care of that, so we're good. Remind everybody, don't forget to read the incident reports, because I feel for staff reading that there are people who are a problem when they've exceeded their time limit. So I think I hope the stress on staff is not too bad, because I think there's already, all of us are under stress, and then working in a mask and behind plexiglass and not seeing people the way you're used to when you're staff. And I know when I was talking to Laurel at TJ and how much they miss the contact with the public, especially in community libraries where you get used to the people who come in and you know them and you talk to them because you know them. And so just pass that along to staff. As one president once said, we feel their pain. Okay, I think that's it. And I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Phil.
Any second?
Second here.
Oh, second. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That passed unanimously. So we are adjourned, and thank you all for a really good meeting.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.